Okay, this video is about freeing Corey Miller, rapper C Murder. So this is out of really talking about uh, a rapper actually that was here way before some of the other rappers that some of you younger people are not aware that there was a rapper by the name of C Murder, and of the Huffington Post, and he's a relation of some other people that are famous names. So witnesses they recant a testimony that put this rapper away for life in prison. So for nearly 16 years, Corey Miller has maintained his innocence. So two new court filings bolster the claims that the authorities framed him. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of sort of a look back into when I was, a teenager or when I was younger. Now, during the times when we had rappers or we had people that were, influential in music, they, during the rap era, there were a lot of rappers who were surveillanced. And so a lot of rappers were followed, and there was a lot of, I guess before TMZ and, some of the people that you see now on TV, there are a lot of paparazzis. And so the thing is that it was extremely hard to prove your case because a lot of guys have gotten, and women and men have gotten locked up for crimes that they haven't done, crimes they haven't committed. And so Jefferson says Jefferson Parish. Okay, so this is roughly a decade after hip hop artist Corey C. Miller, or let's say C Murder is his stage name, but his name is Corey Miller. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a fatal shooting, and new evidence has uncovered that raises serious doubts about his guilt. So the two principal prosecution witnesses, the only ones who testified, Miller was the gunman who killed a 16-year-old Stephen Thomas in 2002. They've recanted their testimony since then. Actually, they were, I read the article. So basically, the two that were testifying or that were forced, they were coerced what to say, and they were threatened that they needed to testify against this rapper, this guy who was wrongfully accused of a crime that he didn't commit. So it says in separate affidavits, the witnesses said that the detectives in the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office coerced, or they pretty much coached them into deliberately and wrongfully identifying this Corey Miller as the gunman. And so I know that the individual who I saw shoot the gun was not Corey Miller. 35-year-old Kenneth Jordan, one of the witnesses that recanted, wrote a signed affidavit, and the other witness of 36 years of age also he wrote in an affidavit. Okay, so his name is Darnell Jordan, who is no relation to Kenneth Jordan. He signed a similar affidavit saying that he too lied on the witness stand. And so this man that you see pictured here has been locked up wrongfully and accused of a crime he didn't commit. And you will find out he's actually related to Master P, Romeo, and it's a family of artists. And so they have long, long fought to try to prove that he's innocent and that he wasn't the one that committed the crime. So I remember when this happened way back in that time, and everybody was kind of really shocked to see, that he was accused of this, and nobody could find any way to get his name cleared. So I am certain that Corey Miller did not shoot Stephen Thomas, or Steve Thomas is the person that was killed, wrote Jordan, who was a bouncer at this. It was a club in New Orleans of Harvey, and it was called Club Platinum. And so there's several documentaries that are on. I believe there was one too that was on Netflix, but I don't know if it's still showing. But it talks about people famous name, or people who were once rappers who were convicted of crimes that are questionable. So both affidavits were filed on the 24th in the 24th Judicial District Court in the past week by Miller's attorney. So Paul Baker, who is requesting that the court advocate Miller's conviction. So the entire conviction was based on the testimony of two witnesses, and we now have the affidavits that recant both of the testimonies. So Baker told Huffington Post this, and so we can now essentially impeach the state's entire case. There's nothing left for them to hang their hats on. And so I believe as it goes on, you can see a picture of C. Murder pictured at my right with the yellow beanie. And then you can see the other people standing alongside. So he was really popular back in the days for his music. And I believe he still has, if there is a possible, I believe he might still have some music. So his crew, most of the people he was involved with, it was Snoop Dogg, Mystical, and Mac in the 1990s with a record label called No Limit. And so Miller's the younger brother of hip hop mogul Percy Master P. Miller. That's Master P for those who knew of those rappers back in that time. So he became a platinum selling artist on his brother's No Limit record label. And so this was in the 1990s. Okay, so like I said, he was alongside of Snoop Dogg, Mystical, and Mac. So Miller grew up in New Orleans, a city sordid with police history that was once dubbed the murder capital of America. So the Jefferson Parish sheriff at the time of Miller's arrest was Harry Lee, now deceased, he referred to himself as the king of the suburban New Orleans domain. So he was pretty much the tyrant. He regularly made headlines for his aggressive policing of blacks and was known to criticize rap music, claiming a glamorized crime. So discussing Miller's arrest with the Times. Okay, so this is, I guess, one of those names that's, it says the Picayune, and so I may not be pronouncing it correctly, so it's probably Louisiana. So in 2002, Lee theorized that the hip hop artist living out his lyrics, quoting a detective who worked the case, Lee reportedly said Miller wanted to be a gangster. And so I remember this. It was, if his name is C. Murder, then he's going to get what his name is. So he's pretty much targeted. So Baker believes cops were quick to zero in on the client because of his profession and his stage name. So that was the whole thing that they felt is why they zeroed in on him and aggressively policed him to the point to where they just threw the book at him. It's like, you have life in prison. It was like, no getting out of that. So because the rapper's name was C. Murder, it meant to them that he was a murderer. And so the attorney said that they were aggressive in going after him and making sure that he fell for this. So at Miller's trial in 2003, Darnell Jordan testified that he saw Thomas, who had been fighting with several men at the Platinum Club and lying on the ground when a muzzle of light came from the end of Miller's stretched arm. And so the jury ultimately convicted Corey Miller, of second-degree murder. However, before the sentencing, the judge threw out the conviction after finding the prosecution had improperly withheld information from the defense. And so that's what everybody was kind of thinking, well, if they weren't really doing what they were supposed to be doing, then why does he have life in prison? If the jury, they were throwing out the conviction, and all of the other things, they didn't have enough proof, is what I recalled it being. So Kenneth Jordan, who was not called to testify at Miller's first trial, joined Darnell Jordan on the witness stand for Miller's second trial, which began in August 2009. So Darnell Jordan repeated his early testimony while Kenneth Jordan described in detail what he had allegedly seen happen. So C. Murder stood over him and shot him, Kenneth Jordan testified in court. And so it popped my ears. It made my ears ring. And that's how close to the gun, his description he was saying. So the testimony was vital and for the prosecution, and since then they failed to establish a viable motive, and none of other than 100 plus people at the club could place a gun in Miller's hand. So controversy had ensued during this whole deliberation when the jury told the judge that they were deadlocked. And so rather than declare a mistrial, the judge ordered them to continue deliberating. The jury came back with the second time, 10-1 guilty verdict, which in Louisiana is sufficient to convict a person. And so August 14, 2009, Miller was sentenced to life in prison. And so it went on to say he's actually on other artist albums. If you listen, there's they even have on SoundCloud. He's on SoundCloud if you look him up, C. Murder. So Miller's conviction was upheld in 2011, even after the juror Mary Jacob revealed she had a college student that had been pressured by fellow jurors to find Miller guilty. So literally, it made this 20-year-old girl so violently ill she was shaking so bad. And Jacob said, according to the Times of Picayune, she ran into the bathroom and she was throwing up her guts and she couldn't function anymore. And then that's when she had decided that the judge didn't want to listen to her. So she said, the judge don't want to listen to me then? Doesn't want to listen to us, I told them. Then you want him to be guilty? Then he's guilty. Now let's get the hell out of here. So that's basically what she quoted in her quotes. But Kenneth Jordan now says that despite his sworn testimony, he did not see Miller shoot Thomas. So he says that Jefferson Parish detectives didn't question him until a year later or a year after the shooting, and then threatened him with a decade behind bars of impregnating a 16-year-old girl. Okay, so JPSO officer approached me and offered me leniency in my criminal case if I agreed to cooperate and give them a statement implicating Corey Miller at the time. So it reads that Kenneth Jordan's newly signed affidavit, I told the JPSO officers that I saw the shooter and the shooter was not Corey Miller. So, however, the officer pressured me to lie and say that it was Corey Miller, all while holding criminal charges over that person's head. So basically, they blackmailed one of the witnesses and pressured him to say that Corey Miller was a killer when he wasn't, in fact, a killer. And so this is the kind of stuff that would happen a lot in, neighborhoods that I remember growing up in, where guys would get convicted of things they didn't even do. And it was because of stuff like this, witnesses being pressured or because they looked or they fit the description, and they think that all Black people look like each other. So they a lot of times would jail innocent Black males and females for crimes they hadn't committed. And so this happened very prevalent in the 90s. So this is not uncommon. And so that's what we felt this was another case of that kind of situation. In this situation right here, reading, it says, I was distraught and scared, Kenneth Jordan claimed in the affidavit. JPSO officers told me that I testified against, if I testified against Corey Miller, I could go home, and they told me what to say. And they fed me the facts about the fight, the details, the DJ, the dance party, and none of which I really even knew. And so he further claims authorities picked him up on a material witness bond 2 weeks before Miller's second trial, and he said that he reiterated to them that his statement was untrue, but was still forced to testify anyways. And so, on countless occasions, Mr. Jordan told members of the law enforcement and prosecution in 2003 recorded statements JPSO officers were not true. That the person he saw that commit the shooting was definitely not this rapper, C Murder, as he's called his stage name, Corey Miller. It wasn't him. And so, and that he did not want to lie under oath, but about Corey's involvement. So Baker wrote in the court filing at no time during the 15 plus years proceedings in this tortured case has the state once disclosed this information, so to Mr. Miller himself or to Mr. Miller's attorneys. So they kept a lot of this stuff hidden. So this is another picture of Corey Miller, and he was a big rapper back in the time, and he was I think he was at a point where he was at a, he was really big back then, during that era. And it just seemed like all of a sudden this incident happened and it took him off of, you know, out of the public eye. And so the kicker, he said, so you're telling me that your star witness at the trial number 2 wasn't important enough to be called during trial number 1. So it goes on to talk about it. You can read the rest of the article, but basically, here's also C Murder, Dear Supreme Court Under Pressure. So I guess there's videos, there's music still online. So basically, in a nutshell, this article is pretty much telling you that this is coming up all over again, that this man did not do this. He was not the shooter. And so everybody felt that he was not the shooter. Now, it did talk about his past, but it has nothing to do with this case. So I just want to make mention of that. But anyway, like it says here, it goes down. Okay, Baker told Huffington Post especially troubling that the prosecutors didn't put Kenneth Jordan on the witness stand until the second trial. So they withheld evidence, basically. And so both witnesses maintain they have long been troubled by the false testimonies, but were fearful of recanting. So they were afraid, the witnesses. They only recently decided that it was time to tell the truth and come out. And so I want to right the wrong that I made all those years. Kenneth Jordan wrote, I can no longer live with knowing that Corey Miller is sitting in jail for something he did not do because of a fabricated statement. Okay. And so that is what I'm saying here, people. He's but one of probably many people who have been wrongly accused of a crime he did not commit. So Miller, who is 30 years old at the time of the Thomas slaying, he had a history of run-ins himself with the police, but in 2001 he was arrested for shooting with a semi-automatic pistol inside a nightclub when he refused entry. But the video of the incident was circulated online, and Miller ultimately pleaded no contest to 2 counts of attempted and second-degree murder. So Baker, who acknowledges his client's prior legal problems, said that they have no bearing in this particular case, and that's what I'm saying. I actually said it before this. But there are people who a lot of times will say, oh, he's done X, Y, and Z in the past, so he needs to be jailed. But this is not how it works, said their attorney. And so this is a case with no physical evidence, no DNA, no forensics. And so with that, it says, of course, we want to see justice for the victims' families and for justice for putting an innocent man away. And the Sheriff's Office, Jefferson Parish District Attorney Office would not comment on the case. So I believe that this person deserves to be exonerated or freed because he did not commit the murder. So that's pretty much this video. And so, what are your thoughts and your feedback on this? You can look at the videos of things that have happened, prior to this. There's music, I believe, even on Spotify, on iTunes. And so, I believe that he did not commit this crime. So, thoughts, comments, feedback, witnesses recant on the testimony. How do you feel about Black people being locked up for crimes that they haven't committed? This is something that we still yet have never been able to get over. We've always battled this as people of color. And so, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.